An unseen man climbs the exterior of a sorority house where a Christmas party is being held and enters the attic. The house phone then rings. Sorority sister Jess Bradford answers to discover it is an obscene phone call from a person who has called before, whom the sorority has nicknamed the Moaner. Jess and the other sorority members listen as the caller rants and screams in strange voices before abruptly threatening to kill them. Upset by the call, a younger student named Claire Harrison decides to leave and goes upstairs to her bedroom to pack her suitcase. There, unbeknownst to the rest of the sorority, Claire is attacked and asphyxiated by the intruder. The following morning, Claire's father arrives, saying that she failed to meet him at a train station. Housemother Mrs. McHenry offers to help Mr. Harrison look for her. Later that day, Jess informs her boyfriend Peter that she is pregnant and plans to undergo an abortion, much to his disapproval. Meanwhile, Harrison and two other sorority members, Barb and Phil, attempt to report Claire's disappearance to Sergeant Nash. Nash does not take them seriously until Chris Hayden, Claire's boyfriend, barges in angrily later in the day and demands something be done about it. A search party is held that night for Janice, who is a local girl that went missing, in which Harrison, Chris, and most of the sorority gets involved. Meanwhile, Mrs. McHenry discovers Claire's body in the attic before the killer murders her with a crane hook. Shortly after, Jess answers another obscene phone call and decides to file a report with the police. Lieutenant Fuller arrives with a telephone lineman to tap the phone so that the police can determine the identity of the caller. After Fuller leaves, a group of Christmas carolers appear at the front door. As Jess watches the singers, the killer sneaks into Barb's room and stabs her to death with a glass unicorn figurine, with her cries for help being drowned out by the carolers. Jess then receives another obscene phone call, in which the caller emulates parts of her argument with Peter. Fuller calls her to say the attempt to trace the call failed, and they both begin placing suspicions towards Peter. Jess and Phil decide to lock every door and window in the house. Shortly after, however, Phil is murdered by the killer after finding Barb's body. Jess receives yet another obscene phone call, which is successfully traced by the police. Nash instructs Jess to leave the house immediately, as the calls are coming from inside. Jess goes to alert Barb and Phil, only to discover them dead. Jess sees the killer's eye staring at her through a door crack before she slams the door against him and flees. The killer chases after her, and, unable to open the front door, Jess runs into the basement, locking it behind her. Shortly after, though, Peter breaks through the basement window and slowly approaches Jess as he worriedly asks if she is okay. In a state of panic, Jess beats Peter to death with a fire poker, and police find her barely conscious as she cradles Peter's body. Believing that Peter was the killer, the police put Jess to bed and leave her sleeping alone in her bedroom, with a police officer standing outside the house. Shortly after, the killer's voice is heard from the attic, where Claire and Mrs. McHenry's corpses remain undiscovered. The attic hatch opens before the house's telephone begins to ring.